So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 101, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Thacker, who's currently the VP of Monetization at Poshmark. So Poshmark is a leading social marketplace for buying and selling fashion, home decor, beauty, and more. So part of Poshmark, Audie was at TikTok, where he led the TikTok Creative Exchange, which is a marketplace for connecting businesses with creative experts. He was also previously the product lead for Facebook's Marketplace Monetization team. So this is a really great chat with Audie, where we dove into his past experience, discussed monetization strategies for marketplaces, insights from leading monetization at some of the leading and category-defining marketplaces, and also had a really great Q&A for those on the chat. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I know you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Audie, welcome to the group chat. It's definitely great to have you join us here today. So you have some pretty incredible experience at Facebook, TikTok, and now at Poshmark, specifically with our product and monetization. So, I'm really excited to have you join us and dive into things. Before we jump into things, though, I think it might be great if you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background, though, for those that don't know you, and then, what led you to marketplaces?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, good morning to all the folks on the call. So, I can jump in. So I'm currently at Poshmark. I lead the monetization function here, and that basically what that essentially is finding a way to increase the effective commission or take rate for the company. So fairly new here at Poshmark. I've been in marketplaces for the last several years. Prior to this, I was at Facebook. I was at Facebook Marketplace, where I led their monetization team. I also worked on a bunch of ad products at Facebook, and ads are also marketplaces because you basically have advertisers, you have ad supply, and you need to kind of connect the demand, which is advertisers, with actually users, which is the supply. So I did that for a couple of years, so totally around 4.5 years at Facebook. And I forgot, between Facebook and Poshmark, I was briefly at TikTok, and I was there for a little under a year. At TikTok, I worked on a B2B marketplace for connecting businesses with agencies and individual creators to basically help businesses create better TikTok videos for the platform. Let's see. So prior to that, my introduction into marketplaces was a tech startup. So I kind of stumbled upon the world of marketplaces via this startup. I basically built this startup to kind of help students discover educational content. It was a failed startup, but I learned a ton about marketplaces, about ads, and things like that. So that's my background. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I think that's pretty much it. I think that's my background. And I actually, so my career has been in product management mostly. I took a small break. I was in management consulting for a couple of years, and that's it.
Yeah, that's a pretty incredible background, and thanks for sharing with us. So going back to Facebook, could you share a little bit more about what you're working on as far as the Facebook Marketplace?
Yeah, so the Facebook Marketplace basically is a marketplace it's kind of like a classifieds marketplace, which sort of is morphing into a sort of a shipped, like an eBay-like marketplace. Essentially, you basically have buyers looking for used stuff, right? Could be anything from cars, could be apartments to rent. It could be electronics, apparel, what have you. So basically, the way marketplace, the Facebook Marketplace team was organized, you basically had a buyer team that was that kind of took care of the product from a buyer side. You had a seller team that took care of actual supply, and then you had a team that connected buyer and supply. So I was on the monetization team, which was a platform, and the goal here was to basically generate revenue or ad revenue for the marketplace. What was unique about Facebook Marketplace is we didn't have any take rate or commission, right? At least when I was there. I think they have since moved to a sort of like a listing fee and a commission as well. But most of the monetization levers for us were ads, because that is and that was Facebook's superpower. So I have a framework that can be applied to most marketplaces that I will share with this group shortly. But I think the levers that we used at Facebook were basically display ads. So kind of using third-party ads that were basically displayed with listings. So, and they would usually take the buyer off site. And then we also had this product called boosted listings that basically helped sellers increase exposure by paying for distribution. So yeah, that's what we did. It was a multi-million-dollar business at that time. We took several products from 0 to 1 and then grew them as well.
That's really interesting. I know it's going to lead to questions later on, in the chat. But I find it very interesting in that, a lot of the founders here in the community, of course, are going from 0 to 1 and kind of building from the ground up. But at Facebook, obviously, you had, critical mass and, the scale. So what were some of the unique challenges with it as a marketplace kind of being at scale and introducing more of the marketplace model?
Yeah, so I think as a marketplace, I won't talk about monetization, but I think as a marketplace, I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned at Facebook is you want to find product market fit on both sides of the marketplace, right? I think you want to have that on your demand side and on your supply side. So before you even think about monetization and a fee or having a promoted listings product, like you want to make sure that your marketplace is creating value for the buyer, the seller, the demand and the supply. So I think that was our first step when we basically. So I worked on a marketplace which was stuff, which was like selling used stuff, but also on the jobs marketplace at Facebook. And I think we always built up supply, then generated demand. And we started local, kind of found our wedge in terms of, hey, let's really focus on low skill jobs, for example. Let's make sure we get product market fit for that segment, and then sort of let's peel the onion and move on to other sort of segments, right? So I think it's critical for founders, for early stage startups to find that PMF, product market fit.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So I guess transitioning into TikTok, right? So what led you to then joining the TikTok team?
Yeah, so I was on the monetization team at TikTok as well. So the exchange that we built was to help businesses create videos that would get exposure on TikTok. I think one of the biggest. So I think why did I join, right? So I think when I was at Facebook towards the 4th or 5th year, I think it was pretty apparent that so when you run a ads product, you want the organic product to grow, right? Because if the organic product is not growing, it's very hard to grow an ads business, right? So I think the choices I had was basically to move to a different part of Facebook or kind of continue working in ads on a different platform. We knew that TikTok was stealing Facebook's lunch initially from a user standpoint because growth was phenomenal. And we knew that typically, ad dollars follow eyeballs. So I knew that, and as we're seeing right now, that, the ad budgets are shifting from Facebook to TikTok. So that was my motivation to move. And that's why I went there. The problem we were solving is basically a lot of the content on TikTok is produced by, kids or Gen Z having a good time. It's very spontaneous. It's fun. And it's very hard for an advertiser, like think of like a 7-Up or a Pepsi or Nike, to kind of create that spontaneous content. And the algorithms will not distribute stuff that is formal and staged and produced in a really slick manner with consumers like you and I, right? So we basically had to build this platform that connected businesses with agencies that could transform their brand into something that was fun, that we think that we hoped would get distribution with the TikTok algorithm. So that's why I went there, and that's what I did there.
Yeah, no, that's I'm sure it's a super interesting, time and experience there. So could you kind of walk us through it though in a little bit more detail as far as, how you kind of introduce that? You mentioned it as a B2B marketplace. Yeah.
So B2B marketplaces are, so we took this from 0 to 1. I think so we knew there was a problem right? So I think every product starts with a problem. And we basically started with just kind of doing user discovery on the demand side, which is basically businesses and advertisers. The problem we basically learned is that, hey, like, I'm using my Facebook and Instagram videos and my YouTube videos on TikTok, but it's not getting any engagement. Like, the algorithm is not picking it up. So we're like, well, because we knew that they kind of needed bespoke content, but a lot of businesses don't know how to do it, and they didn't have any internal resources to do it, right? So we knew it was a problem, and TikTok, including Facebook, had set up a lot of manual programs. Like, hey, you know what? This is a problem. We'll connect you with a couple of agencies, but that does not scale, right? So we said, well, I mean, what is a scalable, efficient way to connect demand with supply? It's a marketplace, right? So basically it became a B2B marketplace. So when we knew we had to scale, we aggregated supply, right? We knew we had demand. We were a bit more, I think we were actually a bit more precise. So we said, hey, let's focus on this segment of advertisers or businesses because we don't want to boil the ocean. Focusing on a certain segment of advertisers helped us aggregate the right supply for that segment of advertisers. And it, because I think we had to make sure that the price point that the advertisers could afford is something that would be attractive to the supply that we're kind of planning on aggregating. So we did that. We aggregated supply. We ran a small beta test. We basically looked at we didn't have any transaction fee or commission over here because the advertiser would use the produced videos on ads. So there was a revenue monetization scheme downstream. But we started off with that. We basically looked at desire for advertisers to come back. So we looked at retention. And we found that it was pretty healthy. It was a pretty small cohort. It was not stat sig, but we conducted feedback, got some surveys going. And once we had positive signal, we scaled this up. And then I think it's going to launch in market pretty soon based on my contact with my former team. So yeah, I think that's what we did.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us on that. So something I did want to ask about is, obviously TikTok's at some sense of scale too, right? So how much, a lot of what you're mentioning was sounds like it's manual. So like what's, a sense of kind of, did you start to introduce kind of automation or kind of scale the, team around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So once we went past the alpha test, I think beta and beyond, we basically had rules to match demand and supply, right? You don't need, eventually when you have a scaled marketplace like Airbnb or eBay, you use a machine learning to kind of like match supply and demand. When you are an early stage startup or a B2B marketplace at scale, where there's not such high liquidity, you can use the rules to basically say, look, like, this is what I think is the best match. You basically avoid the edge cases. You may want to shape your demand and traffic in a certain way that you do the 80-20, or you may say, hey, like, I want every supplier to get equal share. So I think we just had like very basic rules. We also had a customer success team, which I think is necessary and I think is recommended when you have a high ticket transaction that involves a service, because a lot of stuff goes wrong, right? Payments, the service that was delivered is not as per expectation. So we had this team to basically arbitrate. So we kind of set it up. It was not super technologically advanced, but we just had simple rules and simple platform policies that we defined to scale it up.
That's somewhat comforting to hear, since we're most of us here are earlier stage and doing it all manual, kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So yes. So, so what were some of the biggest, I would say, like learnings, from your time at Facebook and then maybe TikTok that you've taken with you to Poshmark?
Yeah, there were several. So I think, I keep mentioning this to folks that being a product manager at Facebook was like being an elite athlete at in a professional league, right? Because the expectations are really high to survive and to succeed. And you're getting coached by like world-class executives around you and mentors, right? And it's also like a professional league because we were gold every 6 months, and then you could crush that period, but then you're back to zero, right? So you basically start at the bottom of the table, like in any soccer or any football league. So so it was good. Like a lot of my, principles that I've taken, are rooted in my experience at Facebook. Like, it's like basic product stuff, like, focus on problems, not solutions. Number one, like, you should be, prioritize ruthlessly, right? Number two, right? Now, number three is, yeah, I'll just sort of like, I have a list of like, 7 or 8 things that I kind of stick to, and I sort of my framework whenever I build a product, right? Number three is, when you're seeking product market fit, like find a wedge, find those early adopters, like don't boil the ocean. We got trained really well on defining metrics, success metrics, counter metrics, health metrics, and there was like a lot of rigor and thought put into finding the right metric that was unique and sort of that kind of was representative of the mission and the vision of the product. I also learned how to take anything from idea to impact pretty fast. Like most PMs at Facebook are really good operators, so they're great executioners. So that was pretty critical. And then I think kind of learned like just that, in terms of like monetization, I think we used to say, that is step 99. You want to make sure you have a great product with product market fit. So before you apply any growth hacks or growth tactics or look to monetize, just make sure you have all that stuff figured out and stuff is working well. So I think those are the things that I took. And I think the other thing that was really critical at Facebook was to be a really good PM. Like, and actually being a good PM is to really get everybody on the bus and kind of bring everybody along, right? The designers, the engineers, and they should be excited to work with you, and they should feel energized and empowered, and they feel like this is their product. So I think those are kind of behaviors that are sort of considered and sort of like, are considered as like good PM behaviors and are also incentivized there.
Yeah, those are great. And especially at the point of, not trying to boil the ocean, which is especially important to us as marketplaces here, focusing earlier on. So, so jumping into Poshmark, what then led you to joining the Poshmark team?
So why did I join Poshmark? I've been looking to have greater relative impact in my career. So I've been working at these big companies, and it's been great, right? Because I always say, like, in any company you go to, you're a giver or a taker, right? So at these big top tier companies, you're a taker. You're like absorbing everything and learning all this stuff and talking to all these people that are much better than you are. And I said, well, I think, I'm going to spend my life where I want to give back, like, give back at work, give back to society. And I just feel like I want to do stuff for other people. So I think I wasn't really looking at this point. I just knew that I wanted to do this at some point. And then I know a couple of people at the company. So I know a couple of folks in the C-suite, and they reached out, and we had a few conversations and tried to understand what where they were in their journey as a marketplace. I always want to make sure that they're ready for monetization, because they always say they want to do it. But then, I said, look, bringing me on means you're going to have to make some hard trade-offs in the marketplace, because in monetization, whether it's a subscription or an ad product, you are going to displace organic behavior on the marketplace. So I just needed some clarity in terms of them understanding what they were signing up for, because I think everyone wants to improve their effective take rate, but they don't sort of understand what the give and the get is. So had the conversation with them, and the people seem nice. I think there's a big opportunity here. So that's why I joined.
Yeah, well, we're certainly glad that you're in gift mode. So you're giving a lot to the marketplace community here, and sharing your awesome experience with us. So I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into you did kind of mention the appropriate time for monetization. So if we kind of get into that, and then maybe some kind of like mental models that marketplace founders can use when thinking about monetization early on.
Yeah, so I think with marketplaces, right? Basically, I think you have to generate revenue, right? I mean, because you're a business at the end of the day. I think there's stuff that is mandatory, right? I mean, like the commission. You cannot have a commission, and I think you want to have a commission from day one, ideally, because you don't want to sort of enforce this tax later on, because then you might find that supply might leave, right? So I think in general, in terms of the mandatory stuff, do it at the outset, right? The fees, whether it's on the supply side or the demand side. Mostly, I think I'll go through some models and you'll see that most of the fees are on the supply side. A few marketplaces, like the service ones, that have it on the demand and supply side. So start with your fee. All the other stuff, there are many other levers, like you can have subscriptions for for high volume consumers, high volume producers. You can have a tool to basically help your sellers or supply side market their listings. You can introduce some unique monetization experiences. You can introduce third-party ads. I would say save that stuff for later. I think what's really important as a marketplace founder is find product market fit. Like find your wedge, find your early adopter segment on the demand side, make sure that they retain. Find your supply that services that demand side, make sure that they retain, right? To me, that is like the most fundamental thing. Once and they retain at the given commission and take rate that you're offering, which is a function of the competitive environment. It's a function of the value that you provide, right? So I think there's actually a really good article on take rates that I recommend you guys should read. There's actually one by Bill Gurley of Bessemer Ventures. It's called What's Your Rake? So Bill Gurley is like master marketplace investor. So you should definitely read that. There's another one by Lenny Rachitsky on take rates. So I think you should definitely read those. So I think just going to reiterate, right? Commissions up front, because that's going to be your fee going forward. Don't kid yourself and say that, hey, I'm going to not have commission now, but monetize later. No, I mean, you need a commission to survive, right? The other stuff you can do later on. So yeah, I think that's my that's what the advice that I would give anyone.
Yeah, that's great. I'll definitely include a link to the articles and the recording in this. So Lenny was actually a previous group chat guest earlier on in the communities. Yeah,
he's awesome. I think so he's got he doesn't know me and I don't talk to him, but this is sort of a plug. But you should subscribe to his newsletter. I think it's like $120 a year, but it's sort of worth every penny if you're in marketplaces.
Yeah, certainly agree with that. So so I guess kind of like going back to Poshmark, could you kind of give us like a high level overview of maybe Poshmark as a marketplace, and then kind of touch on some of the unique aspects of it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think this is a conversation I had internally recently, right? So Poshmark is a social marketplace, right? There's actually a lot of social sharing and engagement and discovery happening. And there's no clear definition of a social marketplace. But I think the way I wrap my head around this is that I think you have social networks, right? Basically, which is just like people hanging out, liking, commenting. And typically social networks are characterized by very high overlap between demand and supply. Consumers are producers and producers are consumers, right? And then you have marketplaces, the traditional ones, like you have the Amazons and the eBays, where they're more transactional, right? You have the supply side and the demand side, and they kind of rarely overlap. You have these merchants and you have buyers, right? It's pretty rare that you have a merchant who's a buyer. Yes, you may, but it's not the norm, right? So social networks, basically, they optimize for time spent and engagement. Let's bring these guys together. Let's keep the user on the platform. Let's get them to consume. Let's get them to post. Let's get them to produce and consume again. It's that network effect. On the marketplace side, basically, it's all about efficiency. How do I find the right match so that Mike can find the shoe or hat he's looking for in the minimum amount of time. And then once he does that, let's upsell him more, right? So I think but the goal is to kind of maximize GMV, whereas the goal for a social network is to maximize time spent. I think Poshmark is a bit unique. I think we're in the middle somewhat. I feel like a lot of people come there to like spend time, but also to buy and to sell. And there's actually a really high crossover at Poshmark, so it kind of makes it a very unique marketplace. A lot of buyers want to rotate their closets, right? They'll say, hey, I want to buy a dress, but I want to sell this first so I can fund that new dress. I want to buy that hat, so I want to sell this first. So there's a lot of like crossover, which is kind of unique. So I think just given the dynamic, I think the role of monetization becomes a bit challenging and a bit tricky and fun in some certain ways, because you can draw on some monetization levers that are very unique to marketplaces, the traditional marketplaces. You can draw on some levers that maybe are also used in social networks. So yeah, I think that's what it's like. And then obviously we have, like every marketplace, we have different tiers. On the supply side, you have the casual, you have the middle, and then you have the power sellers as well.
So I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about, on the kind of network side, and what are some of those kind of like levers that you might use to kind of, I would say, like increase the kind of transaction?
Yeah, so I think, to increase liquidity, I think you basically have three main levers in any marketplace. You can increase demand, you can increase supply, and you can increase matching efficiency, right? I think that is the holy grail of any marketplace. So generally, when you can use growth to increase demand, so then you basically will have more buyers for a given seller. You can increase supply, that'll give more choice to a given buyer, and then you can basically increase matching efficiency, which will find the right buyer, the right product for the right seller, or for the right buyer, right? So I think any one of these at an early stage marketplace should have very high sensitivity to move the top line metric, right? Because if you're a mature marketplace like eBay, they have to do a lot of stuff to move the top line metric, which is GMV or orders or whatever they use, right? But if you can, I think those are three main levers. And then you also have monetization levers that are totally different.
Awesome. We're going to jump into questions here in a little bit. Otherwise, you and I'll just go on chatting. But right before we do, so you have some pretty incredible experience on the product and monetization side. So do you have any tips maybe for earlier stage marketplace founders that might be helpful?
Yeah, I'd say look, I've been working on monetization for a while, and I'd say if you're early stage, I think you want to focus on product and for monetization, right? I think and here's my definition, right? Basically, by organic, I mean your organic product is a product that is solving a problem for your chosen user, right? You're whether you're serving you're the babysitting problem with Sitter City, or the dog walking problem with Rover, or the high tops problem with StockX, right? Just make sure you solve that problem, which is you're aggregating supply for the right sort of demand, right? So let me share this one mental framework that was built at Facebook, which is identify a problem with a given. Say you're choosing a space, right? Let's say you want to build an online pharmacy. This is like a really dumb example, but just kind of let's go along with it, right? Figure out what is the most underserved audience and sort of the drug that they want, right? By drug, I mean tablets and medicines and stuff, right? Once you know what that audience is, be really focused on that, and then aggregate supply. So first start with demand, find the problem, aggregate relevant supply, make sure you have simple rules to match. Well, make sure you have the right mechanism to acquire that demand. Make sure you onboard enough supply so there's enough selection for the demand side. Create simple rules for connecting demand and supply. Make sure you know your acquisition channels for demand and supply, and then get that flywheel going, and make sure your product market fit. I think that's like the fundamental stuff, right? I think the monetization stuff can come later on, right? I think once you have product market fit, you can figure out, hey, look, I'm making 15% on every order or on every transaction. how can I increase that? How can I increase revenue, right? Then you can say, hey, actually, I'm going to throw in some ads. I'm going to throw in a subscription. So if you look at DoorDash, they've got Dash Pass. If you look at, I think Uber's got Uber One. So when you have you can introduce a subscription on either the demand side or the supply side for the power users, because they want to decrease their marginal cost of high volume consumption, right? And eBay has got eBay stores on the supply side because they want to list a lot of stuff. So they actually want a discount on the listing fee. They want a discount on other stuff. Dash Pass, DoorDash consumers want free delivery because they're ordering every day, right? So I think this is the kind of stuff you can do later on, but this first you got to figure out the product market fit on both sides.
That's really great. Cool. So we're going to jump into questions right here. Let's see. Hey, Harrison, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Addy. I appreciate the time and for joining. I'm a little different than maybe most of the people on here. So I actually work for a large medical device company that's looking at creating a marketplace and adding that to a linear business. So in our exploration, talking with leadership, there's been a lot of pushback to monetize and create ROI early. And so the question that I have for someone who's built new marketplaces in existing businesses is, how do you manage leadership expectations and give yourself enough of a leash to aggregate supply and demand and get the flywheel turning?
Got it. So just to make sure I understand the question, so they are reluctant to create the marketplace. Is that what it is?
They're okay with the marketplace. I think the expectation is results and ROI quickly, and so maybe they don't give enough time for the exploration to really get the marketplace started and give it time to grow.
I see. Got it. So I think they're okay with the idea of connecting supply and demand, but they're not bought into the revenue potential, the GMV potential.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I think in these cases, I think you're always better off just doing. So I think they probably have existing retail channels, physical, online, correct? And then this is kind of an incremental medium to facilitate commerce, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think in all these cases, I think so with any products, right? I think what you want to do is you obviously paint the vision and say, hey, look, this is what it looks like, 3 years, 5 years out. This is going to it's going to be incremental GMV, and incremental is a keyword because at the end of the day, these executives are incentivized to increase revenue, right? So that helps you align incentives and say, look, this is incremental to what you're doing today. And then say, well, let's work backwards. For us to get there, I need to be at X GMV 2 years out, X GMV 1 year out. But in the next 3 to 6 months, I need to prove this to you, right? So I would basically just start with the proof of concept in which you ideally really hit this pain point that consumers that are buying this medical product are not able to either. It could be a product, it could be some friction in purchase, but if your marketplace can solve a problem for your existing or new consumers, you're going to drive incremental sales with the proof of concept. That's what I would do, right? Because then you can say, hey, look, my vision 5 years out of incrementality actually is being proven out by this. So I think the key is to paint that vision, have a proof of concept that validates your incrementality hypothesis, make sure they're bought into that hypothesis, and then and that the proof of concept actually is something that they actually bought into for the incrementality. That's where I would start.
Love it. Yeah. Thanks for the answer there. Thanks.
Awesome. It's a great question, Harrison. Hey, let's see. Namu, do you want to jump on?
Hi, Adi. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. My name is Namu. I'm a founder of the Sloth, and we're actually building tools within fashion resale space. So I'm really excited to, take notes and learn from your experience. So I know that I've actually sold a lot on Poshmark myself, so I know the marketplace really well. I know that Poshmark has one of the highest take rate on almost all the fashion resale websites that I know of, and I'm kind of curious as to like, what you think enabled Poshmark to charge that take rate and still retain people and facilitate transactions, and with new startups like rentals happening, like what do you think going forward, like Poshmark's strategy would be to like cope with the changes in the landscape?
Yeah, I can't share much on the strategy, but I can actually speak about the history and how one should think about take rates, right? So I think the philosophy between the 20% take rate is just simplicity, right? If you go to eBay, for example, eBay has got a take rate for every category, and they have a listing fee, and then they have a one-time fee as well. I think they have like a sell fee, right? So it's all very complicated, right? So if you're a seller, I'm selling a shirt, I'm selling a baseball bat, I'm selling stuff. Like I don't know what my margin's going to be, because it's almost like I need like a schedule to say, well, I'm selling this is what it's going to be, right? Even shipping fees can be different, right? So I think the philosophy long before I started here was just simplicity. Look, 20% priority shipping on any order, and boom, you get it, right? So is it too high, right? I think you could argue, I think like, Bill Gurley, like, the guy that I mentioned, he always argues that your take rate should be as low as possible for you to basically create liquidity, right? Because I mean, eventually when you have a high take rate, the cost passes on to the consumer, to the buy side, right? So which might be, so it causes friction to list, it causes friction to purchase. So I think with Poshmark, I think, or any marketplace in general, I think if they're at scale, they probably found a point of equilibrium where I'm charging the highest possible take rate without messing up marketplace liquidity, right? That's the way I think about it. Now you could argue that, hey, like, would you increase GMV if you decrease the take rate, which would decrease the revenue, but maybe it might increase the number of listings, it might increase the number of transactions? Totally possible. The challenge with making take rate changes is that you can't run an experiment cleanly, because it's price discrimination. You cannot do an A/B test. And it's sort of like a one-way door, because you don't want to keep changing take rates all the time. So in general, you want to decrease take rates over time, not increase take rates over time, even though I know Etsy recently increased their take rate by 30% from 5 to 6.5. But in Etsy's case, their base take rate was so low that you could say that it was some kind of palatable for the sellers there. I know there's a mouthful, but I can share what's forward-looking. But I think what I can share is that we're always looking at the take rate to see whether it should be adjusted to create liquidity, not to increase revenue, because liquidity translates to long-term GMV growth.
Awesome. That's a great question. I can personally attest that having to raise take rates on your marketplace is not fun. So, hey, Samit, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mike. Hey, thanks, Adi. I'm Sumit. I'm founder of Celia. Celia is a classified marketplace for corporate employees. So think about a Craigslist or Facebook marketplace, but for a corporate employee, where someone from Google wants to buy, sell, or rent to someone from the Netflix. So I'm still in the initial bootstrap mode, and I have a couple of questions for you. Like one, as you mentioned about the take rate, to test the hypothesis that this is working fine, you need to have a take rate from the onset. There was also another hypothesis where if you wanted to find out that whether there is a real need for this marketplace, get to, let's say, 5,000 to 10,000 users first in the same cluster, and then, because including the take rate on the onset itself might introduce certain friction. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, so it depends on, so yeah, most marketplaces tend to be demand constrained, right? So I think in your case, it just depends, right? I think if it's so you want to cluster So it kind of, let me take a step back, right? So you want to prove that this exchange works, right? So if you're at a proof of concept stage, you could arguably do without the commission or the take rate and just see if there's any value in aggregating supply and then bringing demand to basically transact on these classified goods that you have on your marketplace, right? If you feel that is working, then you, based on the competitive environment, similar marketplaces, based on the value you're providing, you might want to land on a certain commission that is taxed either on the demand or supply side, right? I mean, if you are demand constrained, do it on the supply side and vice versa, right? So I think at a certain point, if you want to take this into a scaled marketplace, you will have to charge that tax unless there's another way to monetize, right? I mean, like for Facebook Marketplace, they don't even have a fee, a commission. They just use display ads to monetize a marketplace. So I think it depends on it's very unique to the segment, right? I mean, for example, like take rates vary between 5% and 35%. Like Roblox is insanely high because there's no other platform for a developer, right? eBay is single to double digits. Labor marketplaces are like double digits, or Uber is like 25%, Rover is 20%. So then you need to assess your product space in the competitive environment to land on the number that you want, or forego that completely and just use ads or some other lever, like a subscription, like Sitter City uses, for example. Yeah.
Thank you. That's useful.
Awesome. Looks like we have a question here on the in the chat, and it was about if you have any ideas for other ways to increase earnings per sale or customer if increasing the take rate isn't really an option.
Increase the earnings, so increase the basket size of goods that are being purchased.
Yes. Let's see. Hey, is Basil? Do you want to jump on? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Yeah, Basil in Australia.
Yeah, so is a question, Basil, to how do you increase the size of the basket so you get higher revenue, essentially?
Yeah, potentially the size of the basket, or that could either be by increasing the number of items being ordered, or are there any other kind of ideas you've got? I did a post in the community just recently around insurance potentially being a way to increase revenue, offering an insurance option, but just wondering whether you've got any other ideas. Just to give you a quick overview of what we're doing, basically we're a dress and accessory and bag rental marketplace in Australia. We've got pretty good traction, pretty good supply, quite a bit of traffic, but we're trying to kind of to increase our profit margins, I guess, because we're a B2C marketplace, and we kind of want to stick to having prices at least equal to what our suppliers would offer them directly. Mm-hmm. We're kind of limited in what they're willing to accept as a take rate. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for ideas to kind of either potentially increase that take rate, but from what you've been saying in your previous answers, it doesn't seem like that's the way you'd approach it. So maybe some other ideas on how to increase profitability per sale or per customer.
Yeah, or maybe you can reframe the question or the actual problem as how do you increase revenue in the marketplace, right? Based on existing commerce, right?
Yeah.
Let me share a simple framework that I'm about to publish soon. So I won't share it after this call, but I'm going to write a LinkedIn post and then I'll tag you guys on it. So I think this is sort of my mental model, right? Basically, so when you generate revenue, you're basically monetizing user value, right? Any monetization product is, you create value and you capture value. The stuff in green on the left is your take rate or fee or commission. That is pretty much standard. That's table stakes, right? I mean, you have to charge that. And most of the rake or the take rate is on the seller side, right? I mean, the most popular marketplaces. You do have some buyer side fee, like Airbnb has got a split fee for some kind of properties. I know Upwork and Fiverr have got. I think Upwork, maybe Fiverr doesn't have a buyer side fee as well. The stuff I think, Basil, that you might want to explore is seller marketing tools. Like pretty much every marketplace now has got seller marketing tools, basically. So typically when you have a high volume seller, like I think, you're talking about fashion and apparel, you may have different tiers of sellers. You may have casual seller, you may have a boutique or a store with a catalog. They want to move inventory faster. So their willingness to pay, which is sort of a premium over the take rate, like an additional take rate, you could consider seller marketing tools. And there's actually a lot of startups now that offer these first-party ads out of the box, like companies like Kevel and Online Sales, and a bunch of these companies can just get your ad product out of the box pretty quickly. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot more is subscription services. Like I think I mentioned Uber One is a new. So basically, like when you have a high volume consumer that wants to decrease the marginal cost of the next purchase, they're typically willing to pay a subscription fee for premium services or lower fees, et cetera, et cetera. And then you might consider like monetizing unique experiences, right? For example, I think like Sitter City does a background check, right? That's a very unique service for that marketplace, right? I mean, you wouldn't see this on any other marketplace, but when you're trying to hire a babysitter or maybe even like a dog walker, for example, you want to make sure that the person coming to your house is not a crazy person, right? So this is what they monetized. And then I think I mentioned ads, third-party ads might be a lever. So, I mean, this is pretty standard. I think what I would say, Vessel, is like just try and figure out what a unique pain point is that's unique to your marketplace that might be worth monetizing. I think it's very hard. I think increasing take rates don't have great outcomes. I think, Mike, I would love to hear your story. I've heard stories from eBay in which increasing take rates don't really help. And generally, in principle, I think you want to increase liquidity and commerce volume versus decrease it. So I know that this is a pretty canned answer, but I think I would have to dig really deep into what's unique about your marketplaces at all the addresses to give you a more precise answer. Yeah, and in general, I think this is how I think about any revenue. So basically, your revenue in a marketplace is your fee times GMV minus any adjustments like fraud or returns. When you have an additional monetization team, basically you're basically increasing, you're adding the non-fee revenue stream. I think, and that's what your team needs to figure out. What is a non-fee revenue stream that can be generated by offering a unique value-based service to the buyer or the seller side?
Awesome. Thanks for giving us the first preview on this. So it's going to be a great post. Hey, so on the note of a monetization team, what is like the makeup of a monetization team and look like at from your experience? Yeah, so it depends. So I mean, a lot of these monetization products are basically, they're basically products, right? So it's basically a team of product managers that are working on ad products or subscription products, or so I think that's what it is. I think the different orgs. So Facebook was highly matrix. So basically, the monetization team had a bunch of product managers. And then we had dedicated engineers and data scientists or analysts and designers and marketers that were dedicated to the monetization pillar. At Poshmark, we have the GM model. So I think it is a VP/GM model. So a lot of different functions kind of ladder up into the VP and GM function. But I think like when I write my vision and my roadmap for the org, it's basically, hey, this is the problem we want to solve. This is the impact we're going to have, and we're going to do it by building these products, in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and that's what it looks like basically. But you need, it is a product-centric role. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how it can differ though across marketplaces. So. Cool. We're going to try to squeeze in one last question if we can. Hey, Mark, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks, Adi. You said something piqued my interest. You said create rules for connecting supply and demand. think we've been having way too many conversations around here about just conversion through the funnel, kind of all the way to purchase, which is a related stream, obviously. But this, I actually haven't used that term before, the connecting supply and demand as part of conversion. But I'd love an example of a rule or a type of rule for connecting supply and demand.
Yeah. So let me give you an example, right? So when we were connecting businesses to creators and creative agencies, we knew that some creative agencies were really good for some industry verticals, like, for gaming or for commerce or for CPG. So we actually had hard rules that, hey, like for any advertiser that is in this vertical should go to these suppliers. Any advertiser that is a small, medium business should not go to these, because I think they all have different price points that even if you make the connection, it's not going to lead to a conversion. So you want to kind of get to a point where you display options to the demand side. And then you can optimize the page view to conversion on the actual product detail page later on. But I think you want to understand the supply, their preferences, in terms of what they serve offline, because the supply side exists out of your product, right? I mean, they basically exist in the open market. What your marketplace, I think, is doing is just aggregating all these and bringing it into an online form, right? So the better understanding you have of what their sweet spot is, you want to make sure that those rules are hard-coded, because it becomes a good experience both for the buyer and for the seller, because then they can say, hey, look, this company is doing a good job at bringing me demand that I would not find elsewhere, or actually I would find elsewhere, but it's a lot more expensive for me to acquire them. But it's also very relevant because they are within my wheelhouse. I'm just going to make stuff up, right? Yes, they're a small business. They're in the gaming industry. They typically they're based in the US. And then that just sort of really it eliminates a lot of junk and noise. And then you can ideally figure out, once you have a few transactions going, you can get them to rate the supplier. And then based on that, you can create that flywheel to add additional signal to increase fidelity in matching. But I think the basic rules is don't do dumb stuff. Make sure that, you don't connect a supplier that wants a small business with someone that is a big brand, right? And then also eliminate all the bad stuff and then go from there. Yeah.
That's really good. Hey, real quick, we're on the B2B side with TikTok. Did you guys have a dedicated sales team on the demand side?
Yeah. So on the B2B, yes. So I think you need a dedicated sales team to get to, we had a dedicated sales team early on, especially to kind of push the product when it was in beta. But as we launch, I think there was a broader marketing push that was done via marketing efforts to the broader advertising community at TikTok, in which this product or this marketplace was advertised. And then hey, look, all I have to do is come in and sign in with my single login and I can use it. But I think early on, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was a great last question and way to wrap up the chat. So thanks again for taking the time to join us. This is a really fun chat, and we got like a masterclass on a monetization for marketplaces. So this is great. Right before we kind of wrap things up, though, if you were to go back to maybe right before you got into the world of marketplaces, what would you tell yourself about them?
Before I got in, so as I mentioned, I stumbled upon the space, and I think it was a very fortuitous accident, because I really love the space. I think it is you kind of understand a lot of economic truths when you work on supply and demand and pricing and things like that. So I think. It is very interesting for anyone that that has studied economics or political science or engineering to be in the space. What would I tell myself? Actually, I wish I had read up stuff like Bill Gurley early on, because I mean, he's such a master mind in terms of understanding market dynamics. I would just like have read up a lot more, but I think, like most things in life, you always refer to help and guidance when you're in trouble. So because you feel like you can handle stuff head on. But yeah, I think most of the learnings I've had actually have been doing stuff and then also reading up stuff in retrospect and then tying those two together. So it's very hard to read something beforehand and say, hey, this is something that I might encounter.
Certainly agree with that. And on that note too, for time for kind of a quick plug. So where can we keep up with you so that way we can see your the post that you give us a preview of? That'll be
I actually have a massive backlog of marketplace posts that I've been meaning to write. So I think this is going to be a forcing function to actually get the marketplace monetization framework post out. So maybe out in a couple of weeks. So I think by the end of June is sort of something you might expect. So Mike, I'll tag you on it, and maybe you can tag all the attendees on it.
Awesome. I'll definitely do that. So yeah, thanks again for taking time to join us today. This is a really great chat. And thanks everyone for the great questions.